Anyway, let's move on to your segment.
Yes, my segment is going to be very similar to Harry's and the previous one. And, of course, this is all being kicked off by the murder of Irina Zarutska. Obviously a horrific thing. And I wanted to look at just the growing trend of unprovoked attacks on people, who's doing it, how it happens, why it happens, because one of the key things about talking about crime is that people want to know how to stay safe, what to look out for, and this is going to be a bit of a difficult segment because there doesn't seem to be any clear way of avoiding it unless you just avoid places where these people are, and we're going to see who these people are soon enough. And
who would your spicy uncle at the dinner table recommend you don't go near?
I can think of a few suggestions, yes, and all of these cases are unprovoked attacks from both the US and the UK since the start of September. Currently, it's the 10th of September, so it's not been, it's not that far into September, yet I have many links, which is sort of suggesting that, of course, I'm using anecdote a little bit here, but the data's already out there. We already know who's carrying out these sorts of unprovoked attacks at a disproportionate rate. But we're going to look at some specific examples because that's what you need to avoid it. And I want you all to stay safe because this is my main sort of practical implication of these discoveries is not only the need for political change and how awful they are, but also how do I avoid these? How do I advise my family to avoid these things? Because I want them to stay safe. And this is, in many cases, a matter of life and death, and it should be taken seriously. And you should be able to notice the patterns, basically, between these sorts of criminals, who they are, why they do it, where they come from, what kind of places these crimes happen. And there isn't necessarily actually as clear a pattern as we would like, but there is a general picture. And I think that there are certain people that do it more often. Here's an example. This is something that happened not too long ago. Sort of got lost a little bit with some of the other news. A university professor was stabbed to death while she was walking her dog. There she is. She was walking her dog in a park that she went to regularly in broad daylight, and a man came up to her and stabbed her for no reason. And let's have a look at the man. There he is. Yeah. Harold Rashad Dabney III. He's been charged with 2 counts of capital murder in connection to her slaying. Doesn't seem to be any motivation. As far as I'm aware, the police are still looking into why he did this in the first place. It's not necessarily clear whether he even knew who she was. It seems like it was completely unprovoked and just done, for no good reason. Not that there's any good reason to murder people, of course. And there's a similar thing here. This is really awful, really quite frustrating. Georgia care worker who allegedly beat 1-year-old boy black and blue released on bail. There is no reason to hit a 1-year-old child. None at all. And to beat them black and blue, someone else's child as well, not that makes it any better, when they're in your care, when they trust you to look after their children, is one of the most evil things, an ordinary person can possibly do, right?
This isn't just the case either of a friend saying, you can look after my child because you're my friend and I can trust you. This is a daycare worker, somebody who was trusted by an institution to be paid to look after other people's children.
So there she is, Yvette Thurston, 54. She was let go, by the way, on a $54,000 bond for some reason. I don't know how you can be allowed to walk free after you beat a child. I can't think of anything worse. But there's the poor child.
Oh,
I'm not going to linger on that because it's obviously horrible. But yeah, there doesn't seem to be any real reason for it. And she also tried to avoid it. She said that, another child hit them over a dispute about a toy, but then they looked at the CCTV footage because they thought, how could a child do that to another child, right? Just in terms of physical capability. And then the CCTV showed that it was her that did it. I don't know for what reason she did it, but there is no good reason to do that sort of thing, right? So This is, it sounds like it's from Britain because it says Southend, which is a place in Essex, but I think this is in New England. So, man arrested after unprovoked assault on Southend woman. And this is a direct quote from the woman herself. I was on the phone with my mum at the time, and this man walked towards me. I saw him, but wasn't thinking anything about it. And then out of nowhere, he just came up to me, grabbed me, and just started punching at me. I just remember screaming, "What's happening?" The man, identified by Boston police as Jose Edgardo Miranda Martinez, 62. So it's worth mentioning as well, it's not just African Americans that are doing it. There's also people from elsewhere. And also it's interesting that he's 62 years old. That says something about the kind of people doing this, right? Because for most people, the notion of being violent in your 60s is absurd, even if it's even for a potentially just cause. People see themselves as, well, I'm just too old to be doing this sort of thing. Well, this guy's going out of his way to punch random women in the face, minding their own business, speaking to their mother on the phone. I mean, there's no good reason for this. These people should not be in a civilized society. He should not be in America. He has no claim to it. He's obviously from the Latin world, right? South of the border. Why is he here? It shouldn't be. Even if he's born in America, even if he's got multiple generations, why not send him back? You shouldn't have to bear the burden of people like this if you are a good civilization. It's far better for you to get rid of these people for the safety of your own citizens. It's not your obligation to help people like him that punch random women for no good reason. And going to Britain now, man guilty of horrific tube station double stabbing. So this shows that it's not just America, it's nothing unique to the United States. It's the kind of people that you can find in both countries. So, and I'm going to read a decent amount of this because it really goes to show the sort of horror of what is going on here. The court heard that two victims aged 44 and 42 entered Kennington Underground Station at around 10:30 p.m. on Wednesday the 27th of March. It's only been recently published, but this did happen back in March of last year. So this is the sort of statement of it. We've got the details finally. They were part of a larger group who had finished at a local dance class and went to separate platforms. So I imagine people going to a local dance class, probably not loutish, antisocial people that are trying to bring harm on themselves, right? I think they're probably normal people that are law-abiding. A short time later, Green tapped into the station and made his way down to the platform. Just moments later, he launched a ferocious and unprovoked attack on the older man, attacking and stabbing him for around 20 seconds with a knife clenched in his right hand. He continued the attack even after the victim fell to the floor. Hearing the commotion, the second victim rushed over to intervene. Green then began attacking him in the same way, knocking him to the ground before other horrified members of the public intervened. Well done to the people intervening, especially to the person who got hurt for it. Those are the people that can exist in a civilization. And in fact, civilization depends on people having care for their fellow man. So massive respect to those people that actually do intervene, even though you are bringing danger on yourself.
And potentially
not just
legal repercussions as well, depending on where you are.
Exactly, which is wrong, obviously. I think that if you're defending other people, if you're defending yourself, and someone's got a knife, you should be able to use as much force as you deem necessary, including lethal force if you have to. Because at the end of the day, why is the law prioritising the lives of murderers, of people who randomly assault people, over those who defend them? Why should people like Daniel Penny, for example, be dragged into the courts for basically doing a good and moral thing? I think he should have been rewarded, not punished.
We should celebrate heroes.
Yeah. If anyone deserves a statue, it's people like him, right? So it carries on to say, Green then got up and made his way to a lift where he assaulted a 31-year-old woman before leaving the station. Just a wonderful bloke, clearly. Both of the first two victims were rushed to hospital. The 44-year-old victim suffered multiple stab injuries to his chest and a fractured humerus bone in his left arm. The second victim also suffered 13 stab injuries in total. These people did nothing to this man. Let's have a look at who he is, shall we? Here he is. Why is he here?
Yeah.
He shouldn't be here. People like him shouldn't be here, for this very reason. Here's another one. Man slashed in the face by knifeman in unprovoked broad daylight attack on High Street. Again, another person It was 11:45 in the morning. Just slashed in the face for no reason. I don't think there's a picture of the perpetrator in this one, but it's just going to show this was an unprovoked attack that's only recently being talked about because the information's come out, because there is a bit of a lag. But this is a very common thing. If I can just go to the news and look for things that have been published about this sort of thing in the past month, and there's a laundry list of cases, that is an epidemic. That's something that needs to be sorted out. Here's another one. London Bridge, man punched in face in unprovoked attack. So, at the time, a man in his 50s was basically just standing by the escalators near the platforms of 2 and 5. And I think this is the person who's wanted for questioning. Can't really make out too much about him. I don't know where in the world he's from. But he just randomly punched someone who was waiting out of the way, by the sounds of it, by the escalators for no reason. Why would a person do that? This didn't happen before mass migration in Britain, pretty much ever. And in fact, the case of a murder or a stabbing would be news for weeks. People would know all of the details, and it would be remembered. You know, there are cases of murderers that existed long before I ever was born that I know about, because it was such a rare event that it's passed on in the culture.
Yeah.
That there's an understanding of this sort of thing, right? And now this is just regular. In fact, there's multiple cases of it in the news at the minute. It's absurd. Here's another one. Man accused of 2 Oxford Circus station stabbings on consecutive nights. So he stabbed one person and then went back again. Police have charged a 20-year-old man from Tottenham in connection with 2 stabbings at Oxford Circus station over the weekend. Mohammed Yusuf of Winsmews, I don't think he's of Winsmews actually, accused of knifing a 23-year-old man at the Tube at 3:40 a.m. on Saturday, and then a 41-year-old man was then stabbed at the same station at 1:30 a.m. the following day. Both victims were taken to hospital with non-life-threatening or life-changing injuries and have since been discharged. Well, at least that's the case. But this man was clearly going there late at night when there are fewer witnesses, fewer people to intervene, to just randomly stab people, wasn't he? Not being discussed even as a terror attack, despite the guy being called Mohammed. Bit curious, isn't it? Why is this happening? They're going to try and argue it's mental health. Well, I'm going to argue that he shouldn't have been here. People like him shouldn't be here because he comes from a country, clearly, where this sort of violence is more acceptable. And it's not acceptable. Certainly not in a civilised country like this, or at least once civilised. Here's another one. This is all the way up in Scotland. I think it's Lanark, isn't it? Yes. So shopkeeper slashed in totally unprovoked attack. And the details of this one are really quite worrying. Around 10 to 9 in the morning, a 53-year-old man was putting rubbish bins beside his shop, or the shop he worked at, on a road, and then he was approached and slashed with a bladed weapon by a man who then ran off towards another road. Because this is local news, they're naming all the streets. I don't need to complicate it with that. The man was taken to hospital, where he remained for treatment, and the hospital staff thankfully described his condition as stable. Of course, he should have never been put in that position in the first place. Clearly did nothing wrong. And the suspect, which we don't have a picture of, I think is still at large, is described as male, 6 foot, of slim build, and was wearing black jogging bottoms, a black North Face hooded top, and trainers and gloves and things. But apparently, looking at the CCTV, he'd been hiding in the nearby bushes for at least 2 hours before the shopkeeper emerged from the shop. So he was waiting, presumably this happened at 10 to 9 in the morning, from about 7 in the morning, of a man waiting in the bushes, waiting to kill someone. Presumably,
this could sound somewhat more personally motivated if he was willing to
It could
wait.
be, but the police have been treating it as if, well, you know, the 53-year-old man didn't necessarily have any reason for someone to be doing this to him. And so they're treating it as a completely unprovoked attack, as the headline indicates. Because he's just like, well, I have no idea who would do this to me. I've not done anything to warrant this. And I can believe it, because it is becoming more common that people just randomly attack people. And it sounds like it's probably some sort of sick person that is doing it for the enjoyment of it. Just from the details of the case that we know. But of course, who knows, it could be personal. These things are quite complicated and always difficult to know all of the details without having a full picture. And then The final case I wanted to look at, this is an unprovoked attack on a 70-year-old man that was also filmed because the people involved clearly didn't intervene, the people on site, right? The victim told the town council that they were punched in the head, knocked to the ground and kicked repeatedly as the attack was filmed. While members of the public stepped in to stop the assault, again, well done for the people doing that. They gave first aid and called emergency services. The meeting was told the police response was delayed, with the attacker fleeing before officers even arrived. And when approached by the LBO, I think that's the council, Bedfordshire police gave no details or witness appeals relating to the alleged attack, and instead said it was, this is a local newspaper by the way, they're not necessarily trying to affect national news by reporting this, the police said it was focused on ensuring Leighton Buzzard is a safe and welcoming place for everyone. Why would they say that when a 70-year-old man was randomly attacked? It sort of sounds like they're admitting that the man that did it was from somewhere else, because why would they be insisting we want to keep it welcoming for everyone? Of course, Leighton Buzzard is close to Luton, which is known as the home of Tommy Robinson and a hotbed of Islam. Of course, it's very diverse. It might not necessarily be someone who's got that background, to be clear. We're not yet sure. But I wanted to end on a bit of levity, because this has been very heavy. I wanted to run a little test, because what all of this sort of suggests is that you need to be on guard when around these sorts of people. And you don't know when it's going to happen. You don't know who it's going to happen to. You know, there are university professors walking their dogs. There are old men walking down the high street in the middle of the day. There are people starting their shift at work first thing in the morning. Even in Scotland, rural Scotland, where there's not even that much migration from outside of, Scotland itself. It can happen anywhere, to anyone at any time, and I think this is a little bit tone deaf now. I've been so heavy, but I don't want to depress you all, okay? I want you to leave at least feeling a little bit more prepared for the world, and as such, I've got a little test for you to see if you've learnt your lessons. Here we are. I'm not going to... I suppose I may as well play the audio. You can't relax.
It's like a Five Nights at Freddy's jump scare.
Yes. You've got to always be on your guard. You can't take your eyes off of people that are potentially dangerous. You've actually got to be quite vigilant, because this is the world we live in, and I don't want it to be this way. And there are still parts of the world that aren't quite like this yet, that are still unspoilt, and we should preserve them. And what we can do, there is a solution to this, there is a political solution, that what you do is you deport these people, you lock them up, and many other things that you can do to get rid of them off of the street. It's pretty simple. And one final thing I wanted to draw attention to is people always ask me, where can they find me? Now, I'm not on Lotus Eaters as regularly. I do have a YouTube channel. I'd very much...
regularly. I think you've got pretty much your old schedule back.
Once a week's not the same. I was on like sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. But I'd very much appreciated it if you checked out my YouTube channel. It's a nice escape from the misery of politics. I try and keep it non-political. I try and look at interesting things. And so if you're feeling a bit down in the dumps, you can learn some interesting things about the world through there.
Who are the men that pick for scraps amongst the ruins at the end of history? You should know, because you encounter them every day. Between the towering buildings of a fallen empire, we find the Fellaheen, the historyless men, who know nothing of the turning of the cosmic wheel and find themselves outside of civilization itself. Cut loose from the great chain of being, they represent the loam into which our dying culture will return. That is, unless we choose to take up the burden once again. This Fellaheen condition is the subject we explore in issue 4 of Islander magazine, on sale while stocks last and available worldwide at shop.lotuseaters.com.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.